and welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of strength and conditioning and pushing the limits of athletic performance with your host, Joe Ryan. Each week, we'll explore the strategies, tactics, and innovations that make athletes stronger, coaches smarter, and the sports we love even more thrilling. Whether you're a coach, an athlete, or just a fan of the game, we've got something for you. We'll be talking to some of the brightest minds in the industry, sharing their insights and experiences, and uncovering the methods behind the madness of high-performance sports. So tune in, turn up the volume, and let's get ready to learn, grow, and be inspired. This is the Moffitt Method Podcast.
Our next guest is Coach Tessa Grossman, who is currently an assistant strength coach for University of Colorado football. Prior to Colorado, she was the director of sports performance for VCU women's basketball in 2024 to 2025. Prior to VCU, Coach was with Middle Tennessee State as the Blue Raiders associate strength coach for football and women's basketball. Grossman has experience in both college athletics and in the NFL, where she was a Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellow for the Cincinnati Bengals, Atlanta Falcons, and New York Jets. Prior to her time at MTSU, Coach served as a graduate assistant at Illinois State. She has also served as an intern for football as a strength coach with Cal, the Los Angeles Rams, the Mamba Sports Academy, and Dartmouth College, along with Keene Performance. Coach played softball at Dartmouth and received her bachelor's degree from Dartmouth in sociology. She earned a master's of sports psychology from Illinois State. We're very excited to have her on today and can't wait for the knowledge bombs that she'll drop. Coach, welcome on in. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. There's a lot of ties, to Coach Moffitt in your career, being at Colorado now and then Middle Tennessee and, the time you spend at different places. There's a lot of ties, and it's definitely someone that, we had our eye on to get onto the podcast and kind of hear your story and hear how you go about things.
Well, I really appreciate y'all giving me a chance to, talk about my story.
Absolutely. So, the listeners heard the bio. They know the on paper story of you, but can you kind of give us a little bit of insight on how you got to where you're at? How did you get to Colorado? The time you spend in different places and the amount of years or months you spend in the NFL with different internships and leading to where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Oceanside, California, which is San Diego, for most people, and grew up playing softball. From there, I knew I wanted to play college softball. I also knew I wanted to be Ivy League. I was definitely more of an academic kid before I was an athletic kid, and the athletic skill kind of came a little bit later. And so Dartmouth was actually my dream school, so that's where I ended up playing softball and getting my degree from. But when I picked Dartmouth, they are obviously an older institution and they don't have any sort of exercise science or physiology degree. So going there at the time, most strength coaches were getting those types of degrees, and you didn't really see a lot of strength coaches having degrees that didn't match that. So I decided if I'm going to go to this school, the Ivy League education will be worth it, but I need to work my ass off and get as much practical experience as I could. So that way, when I finished my college degree, I would be able to combat, why don't you have an exercise science degree with all the application I had done over those 4 years. So I started doing internships right after my freshman year, started with the private sector place that I trained at when I went home and that I trained out with before I left to college. And that was kind of my first taste. And I started working with high school football and high school baseball athletes. And that was kind of where I realized football might be where my passion lies within strength and conditioning. And so from there, I just started to explore more. I interned at Dartmouth. So the way that Dartmouth works is obviously their main goal is to get you a job when you leave. That's what they do.
Yeah.
The second you walk in the door, they give you, resume, cover letter, all that fun stuff. So if you're an athlete, after your sophomore year, you stay on for that summer and you start your junior year right away. And then they give you an off semester to go kind of pursue what you want to pursue to set yourself up for when you graduate in a year and a half. So for me, that was, it was my fall semester of junior year. So that was how I landed my first NFL internship. which was pretty crazy that I was able to do like an in-season NFL internship right in the middle of my college career. Like, what are the odds that that would line up?
Right. You got
And
a
I
lot of
remember
balancing right there.
exactly, and it's like I have said this so many times. Like I was 20 years old. I had no idea what I was doing. I had done like two S&C internships at that point, and I'm extremely grateful for them giving me the chance, especially as someone now who like runs internships and has had interns under her for the last couple of years. I am 10 times like more grateful that they gave me a chance to prove myself because they did not have to.
Right.
They had more than enough going on inside that building because that was also their first Super Bowl year.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a busy year
A
for
big,
them.
exciting year.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I said a word my first month there. Like I was terrified. I didn't know how to interact with anybody. Like I didn't want to say the wrong thing. Like trying to coach an NFL player when I was that young, I was just like I was pretty much mute my first month.
And I
But it was a
think
good confidence
a
builder.
lot of interns, huh? I'm sure you experience it now hosting interns. It's kind of like pulling teeth the first month or two. Like, it's okay to talk, it's okay to interact. Like, that's the only way you're going to get better. You have to do these things.
Yeah. That's like a whole nother
Yeah, yeah,
conversation, but
yeah.
But the balance of getting your interns to like show personality and like throwing them into the fire, but then making sure that they have enough skill to be able to handle the fire and you're not just like setting them up for like repeat failure.
Hmm.
That is that is an art form in itself that I'm still learning.
Yeah. It's not just about the X's and O's right there in coaching. It's about how to deal with people and set them up for success when it comes to interns.
Right.
So
So
keep going. Yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah, no, 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 no. I could talk about the intern stuff for forever, but we can revisit that. So after, throughout college, I was really intentional with how I built my resume. I really, once I got that NFL opportunity and I was able to make the most out of it, I really wanted to make sure, okay, like I've done like a small D1, I've done private sector, I've had the amazing opportunity to do NFL. I want to get like a bigger program. And so I went and I interned with Cal Football, who the director was Tori Becton at the time, who's obviously now at Texas. And from there, I became a grad assistant at Illinois State. So I worked with football, golf, tennis, and women's gymnastics. But I think like the main thing, honestly, through even the early part of my career was I was really intentional with what I chose to do and where I chose to go. With Illinois State, like it hit all my big things. Like it was a full tuition waiver. It was a stipend that I could definitely live off of, and I wasn't just gonna be like scrapping pennies like month to month. And it gave me the opportunity to be a football assistant at the D1 level. So it like checked a lot of boxes. And I think that's like a theme that follows me through most of my career. It's just like intentionality with what I was doing. So after my first year of being at Illinois State, I really, really wanted to get a Bill Walsh internship. So that really became my main focus. And I spent a lot of time prepping that. I applied, and that's once again a whole nother story on its own. But I graciously got a internship with the Falcons for their first half of training camp. And they were actually the ones who put me up for my Middle Tennessee State job. So after a year of being a GA, I left and took a full-time job at Middle Tennessee State, and I did women's basketball, volleyball, and soccer there. And it was hard to step away from football because I was really young in the field, and I had heard at that point, I think I was like 22, 23. So, I had heard like, oh, if you leave football, it's
Yep.
really hard to get back into football, and you're a female, so like 10 times harder for you to get back into football. So I was really nervous, but luckily, the director at the time of the Falcons, his name is Thomas Stallworth, Dr. Stallworth, and he's still like one of my best mentors to this day. He had a long conversation with me and was like, "You would literally be dumb to not take this job. Like, you're a year out of being a GA. Like, go
Yeah.
take this women's basketball job. What are
Kind of.
you doing?"
Here's your silver platter. You got to get it going.
Li- Literally, and it was like a great program. Like, if you don't know anything about Middle Tennessee State, like the women's basketball program, the coach has been there for 18 years. He's never placed lower than third in conference. They just have a really phenomenal program over there. And so the ability to like go into that. And I think like the best part is because it was such a concrete program, it did give me the space to like grow and learn and like make mistakes to where like we could overcome them because everything else was like so rock solid. I didn't really understand that at the time, right? Like I felt like I was just drowning. But looking back at it, I'm like super grateful I got to go into such a solid program as like a new full-time coach because it gave me the space to grow and not, cost people any issues.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't get hired for football there at all. I didn't get
It's
hired.
totally okay. Hey, this is what makes podcasts great. I love if you're not watching because it isn't live, everyone. Coach has a cat in the house and kind of got in front of the camera right there, so that's great. It's what makes
Little
these things
tail,
great.
yeah. Um, okay, so anyways, sorry about that. But so when I got hired at Middle Tennessee State, I wasn't hired for football, but I was just like, I'm gonna still find a way to be around football while I was there. So I was honestly like anytime I had, I would still volunteer with football. And I did that for about 3 or 4 months. We had a football position come open. I really wanted to apply for it, but I felt like there was just no possible way that they were going to let me do women's basketball and football. I mean, everyone knows that's like a pretty brutal slate to have.
Oh, it's right
And
at
I
the same
traveled.
time. Yeah.
Right. And I traveled with women's basketball as well. So it's like, okay, how am I supposed to do football and travel with women's basketball full time? Like it just, I was like, there's no way that they're gonna think this is like an optimal choice when they could just hire somebody. But those 3 or 4 months of helping out whenever I could basically kind of turned into a job interview without me really even knowing it. And our head coach at the time, Coach Stockstill, he came up to me and was like, Tess, would you consider coming over to football full time? Like, do you think that's something you want to do? And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we went and talked to my director, and I was promoted into an associate director position, and I moved over to women's basketball and football, and that was my role there for 2 years. After that, just to kind of shorten this up a little bit,
That's freaking awesome
ended
though.
up
That it kind of that's what people don't understand. I think in this profession is that sometimes for all intents and purposes, you got to eat shit for a little while and you got to work really, really hard and you got to, maybe not get the recognition or the title at times. And then eventually it's going to pay off. And look what it did. I mean, it gave you kind of what you were working so hard for to get that football and still be able to keep the basketball.
no, like the further I get into my career, the more and more grateful I am for my time at Middle for a lot of different reasons. But I think the opportunity as a young coach to, one, get to be a football assistant at an FBS level, but also two, to still have my own team where it's like I'm still learning how to program, I'm still learning how to run sessions on my own. Like I'm still learning how to handle all these things because my end goal is to be like a football director. So that's what I'm striving for. And as a female, especially, working with other sports is how I'm going to continue to grow as a coach and maybe some more of those like X's and O's standpoints. And I just like have become more and more grateful for my experience in basketball because it has taught me a lot and given me experiences that I don't necessarily always get on the football side of things.
Right. No, yeah. And it's just that different variety of things, it's that different, I guess, the different pace of life. Cause they're two different, whereas basketball, you might be playing multiple games in a week or maybe a tournament or something like that, where football is, you got those 12 to 14 chances to play that you're working 365 days for all year, and it's
Hmm.
you got those little moments, whereas basketball there's a little more leeway and it's a different pace of life for each one.
It definitely is. And, you play 3 games a week sometimes. And
Yeah.
it's like you have a day in between, or like we would do the way that Conference USA was set up at that time. It's pretty spread out. So like if we were away that week, we would have to do 5-day trips, which means you were leaving Wednesday and you're not getting back till Saturday, Sunday morning, like just depending on where you were at and how fast you could get. It's not like we flew charter because like we're on commercial,
Yeah.
So it's like, well, like, oh, we play at Houston at 7 p.m. Yeah, we're not getting out till the next morning. So that's now a 3-day trip. Um, so it's definitely a very different pace. And like you have to be able to bounce back a lot faster. You don't get the full week to like watch the film and see what we did wrong. And like now all this builds up to like one day. It's like, no, like you said, we are moving. We do not got time to dwell on the fact that you didn't hit a shot last night.
Right. And I think you can probably attest to this, that in the high school world, I relate it to like this, the smaller school coaches, those 1A and 2A coaches, when they get to those 5 and 6A, I've always considered them better coaches because they do more with less. And I guess I would say it in the sense of, having to work basketball where it's hustle, hustle, hustle. You don't have time to dwell on it and sit there and watch film. And not saying you don't, but sit there and watch film and reflect on everything. You got to get going to the next game and the next opponent. So it almost
Mhm.
makes you a better strength coach for football because you had to do more with less time in basketball. And those experiences are
Yeah.
going to have to pay dividends today.
No, 100%. And I think like even on like a bigger scale, I think learning how to just be a strength coach. I mean, when I was at middle, we didn't really have a lot of resources. I know now they have like a brand new beautiful weight room and all these resources, but when I was there, like we had a jump mat.
Yeah.
That was it. Like we had some polars for football that
Mm-hmm.
worked half the time. And you had to learn how to, you had to create such good relationships with these athletes to figure out how they were doing and where they were at because you don't have a force plate. I don't have tracking with my women's basketball. Like we did an RPE 1 through 10 after practice, after lift. And I had to learn what their RPEs meant, what one girl's three meant versus another girl's three.
Yeah.
And that was how I tracked it, which is I'm grateful I learned how to do it that way because so after middle I went to VCU and what the big pull for me at VCU was that they are such a sports science based program. They are very objective based, very number based, and they have, they had polar, they were getting connects on, they had force plates, like they had a Nord board, like they had a grip, like they had everything.
Right.
And going from a program where I had nothing to now a program where I had everything was a great learning opportunity, but it made me 10 times more grateful that I had learned how to do without because I just kept thinking like I'm so grateful that if this technology doesn't work today, I can still figure out how to get by versus, oh, I don't have the technology. What do I do now?
Yeah. Yeah. You again, the doing more with less, it's just, you figured it out the hard way in the beginning rather than having to go back in your career and go to a place that didn't have the stuff that you might be used to. And it seems like you're just elevating up, right? Now you're at Colorado and, they've got a ton of stuff going on over there.
Yeah, Colorado has been awesome, and we have like a full-time nutritionist, we have full-time sports science, and I think now the level or now kind of like what you see is like, okay, now how do all these professionals work together and how do we create a cohesive support staff, a cohesive like sports performance department? Whereas when you're at the lower levels or schools that just have less resources or smaller programs, like you're all of it. So, I mean, when I was at VCU, like we didn't have a sports scientist. Like my AT was a sports science whiz and he helped me like really learn a lot. And then, we would problem solve together throughout the season. We'd look at the data. Here it's more like now I go to the sports scientist and I'm asking her like, what do you think? What are the conversations that we can be having? Like, what is the data saying? So it's just like it's a different way of operating as you
Right.
get to each level.
Yeah, that's what, and it's crazy how some places go. Like talking to Mallory Hinderlong not too long ago, she was saying, well, you're looking at the sports science department for girls soccer at Auburn, which I think is great, because it allows you to learn so much, to where when you do get to kind of where you're at, where you do have those people in place, you can work hand in hand with them and not only um, have those topics of discussion, but understand really what's going on rather than, okay, here's this sheet of paper with all this information. All right, well, what am I looking at? I really don't know, but cool. Thanks for letting me know. I'm going to let the kid know. So I think that's awesome that you can, you experienced all that before you got to this point.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for how my position's kind of built up. Obviously, like, didn't plan it that way, didn't really
Yeah,
know that's how that was going to go, but it was an unintentional thing that has worked out for the best.
it all worked out. So, you did more than one Bill Walsh internship. And for those that don't know what the Bill Walsh internship, it's a minority internship in the NFL for not only strength and conditioning, very seldomly, actually, I think you do see strength and conditioning, but
Yeah.
more so for your position coaches. You know, not only are you a female strength coach, a Hispanic female strength coach, right, which is near and dear to my
Hmm.
heart, as a Hispanic male in the profession, in Louisiana, you don't see very many of those. It's a lot of coon ass and Cajuns, but not very many Hispanic coaches. I probably need to hop over to Texas and that'll help me out a little bit. But, you know, you experience all that. So, and now you've made it to the college level where, you're at a big school, you're at a Colorado that has a big name, who's won national championships, who's done big things and had big players come out of there. What's a key difference that you kind of see being at Colorado versus your time in those NFL weight rooms and programs that's, a little bit different amongst the two.
I think like just in general, the biggest difference I see between really any college football program I've worked with, regardless of what level, and like the NFL weight rooms I've had the opportunity to be in, is the type of conversations you have. I think there's a big difference between having, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids who are just coming in and are really still developing and learning how to be adults and learning how to be responsible and learning how to handle money, handle living on their own, all these sort of things that maybe it might be the first time they're learning how to do these things. Whereas in the NFL, I mean, you can have anywhere from a rookie who just signed for an absurd amount of money at 22 years old
Yeah. Well,
to, 13, 14-year-old vets who have families of, three, four kids, been married their entire career. Like, it's just like such a wide spectrum that you get. And I mean, these are grown men. And so they their bodies is their livelihood.
right.
And so whereas like in the college realm, like the goal is still to make it pro. And so
A
they're
little more
still learning
risk
all the
taken, I'm sure, in the college level.
yeah, 100%. And I think in the pro level, from what I can tell, it's way more of a conversation sometimes. Like you may have a conversation with your starting quarterback in the league where they're like, "Hey, I know I got to squat, but I hate front squat. Like it doesn't feel good on my elbow. I don't really like what it does to my throwing arm. So like then it's your job to come up with a compromise of like, okay, well, we need you to squat because A, B, C, D, and E, but what about this variation? What about that variation? Or like a big thing you see is like with the testing, players may not want to do a Nord board every week. They may not want to jump every week, especially maybe like some of your linemen don't want to jump every week. So what's the compromise? Like, how do we find the middle ground to get what we need to get done? But, you're a grown adult and you know what feels best for your body. So where's this middle ground where I think in the college world it's still a lot more of like, look, you're an 18-year-old kid, like what we say goes. Like we're showing you how to create habits. We're showing you how to do things the right way, how to set yourself up for the possibility of going pro. And I think like a big thing you hear is there's more development on the college side.
Right.
I don't necessarily like agree with that. I think it's different. It's like it's a different type of development. Like you're developing young men on the college side, but in the pros, and once again, I was only in these internships for a short amount of time, so I'm just speaking from my experience.
Yeah.
But like in the pros, you're still developing and helping these men develop. It's a different point of life, so the development looks different.
Yeah, it might not be development to get to that level because, yeah, they have made it there, but the development to stay there. How do I change
Right.
things to adapt to the longevity of your career? And I think that's the big key in strength and conditioning at the professional level is just longevity of career. Like I've always hated the term injury prevention because it's a crock of shit. I mean, you can't prevent injuries, right? Things happen, but reduction is definitely a thing, preventative measures to reduce the injury. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where it comes in is like, that's kind of the, where you build upon and I guess make your money as a strength coach in the professional level.
Yeah, 100%, I agree.
So, you've made it to this point, you made it to Colorado, you collegiate softball player, a lot of people, you not everybody was an athlete, but you kind of had that athleticism at the collegiate level and not only that, but an extremely renowned university. Um, and you said you kind of started early, you knew what you wanted to do, that freshman year, this is what I want to do. But was there kind of that aha moment for you, like where you absolutely can pinpoint like, all right, that's what I want to do. A lot of people see it from an injury maybe that they had and kind of going through rehab and going through a true off season of strength and conditioning. Did you have one of those moments where you knew, all right, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah, actually I did, and it came before college. For me, I was like maybe 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was I was a weird kid. I don't know how at 17 I figured this out, but I do remember. So basically, what happened was my high school softball program was honestly a mess,
Mm-hmm.
and it was pretty toxic. And me and my parents just decided that it wasn't really good for my development. And on the softball side, like high school softball doesn't get you recruited in California. You have to go play club ball. So like I already had my scholarship. I was already like accepted into Dartmouth. Like my post high school athletic career was already set up. And so we decided that I wasn't going to play, but my mom was like, okay, you got to do something, which I agreed with. And so she's like, well, you enjoy training, so let's find like a private place to help get you ready for college if you're not going to be playing softball in the spring. And so we went and found like this private sector place, and I was training with all these football boys, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. It was like the first time I had ever been on any sort of like program, first time I really had seen like progress because someone was like instructing me and coaching me versus just like working out in our high school weight room
Yeah.
during like an open period.
Like, go pick up this weight. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Like, I know, I'm not saying that's how I learned, but that's kind of how I learned too. Like, just, all right, there's 135 pounds, go clean it.
Yeah,
All right.
literally. Like I remember we had like a Fitness 19 near my house, and I had like a little membership to it in high school, and like I would just go there for like 2 or 3 hours, and like God knows what I was doing. I think I was just like trying shit and like figuring out what I liked, didn't like, and
Yeah.
it definitely evolved, but it was definitely trial and error.
Right. Here's the cable machine. Let me see what I can do here. Or here's,
Yeah.
same thing. I did the same thing through high school.
Yeah, so when I finally got to be like in a more organized setting, obviously with athletes who were all trying to go play past high school or were already ready to play past high school, or even, there was college kids there, and it was like a glimpse into what my future could look like. And I remember just like I loved it. Like I wanted to train every day to the point where they were like, Tess, like you have to have an off day. And like that sentiment still rings true to this day. Like I still have Tessa, you have to take an off day. Like I'm still not good at taking off days. But that being said, one day our coach kind of mentioned it to me and was like, hey, like this is something you could do as a career. And it's like one of those light bulb fireworks, like everything fell into place for me. And it just is like, yes, like this is what I want to do. I don't know how I'm going to make it happen. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know like how this is going to go, but I want to do strength and conditioning. And so then going into my freshman year and like seeing a real collegiate strength and conditioning program, I was like, oh, like I want to do college. Like this is where it's at. And so that was what started me on that journey. And then it's kind of evolved as I've gotten to try out different parts of the field.
Right. And so you want to do this, you have this career that's, at 17 years old, which is amazing. Not, I think I was 22 years old and still weren't sure that I was going to stick in this. That's when I first started doing it. And I was like, all right, do I really want to do this? I'm going to give myself 3 years. But it's amazing to see that, so you do that, that's what you want to do. But, what we haven't touched on is you also have a master's in psychology, right? I mean, especially in this game, in strength and conditioning, that's huge to have because a lot of it, and especially, the weight room part of it, you have good days and bad days.
Hmm.
There's days where those kids will come in and they may be able to rep a certain amount of weight, and then 2 weeks later they can't do it, and
Hmm.
that's what I think a lot of people don't understand is, you feel good some days, you don't know what goes on at home, as much as you try and put your blinders on when you walk into the weight room or on the field for, any type of conditioning or speed work or whatever it may be, you try to do that, but a lot of people can't separate it. How does that masters and that psychology kind of help you, whether it's a, routine that you have or, just something that kind of impacts their physical training?
I think I'll give you kind of like a 2-point answer.
Yeah.
I think one, it's made me a better coach because just from like the scientific side, there's a lot of different theories on like arousal and how a team environment functions and just like the natural rises and falls that are going to happen and why they happen and all that type of stuff. And so I think having a more like bird's eye view has allowed me to stay a little bit calmer in the chaos because it's like,
Right.
okay, like a team is going to have conflict. Like it's actually like essential in order to grow as a team to have some sort of conflict. A kid is going to have down days, like you just said. So it's like those are all essential parts of it. So how do I help them work through it instead of just like trying to get rid of it altogether? Where I think like sometimes it's like we shouldn't have bad days. Like you should be able to have like perfect effort every single day or whatever. Like that's unrealistic. And so in terms of helping the kids, I what I'm like passionate about is understanding that perfection is unrealistic. Like you just said, like you're going to have days where you are not locked in. You're going to have days where you just cannot get it right. You're going to have days where you fail. You're going to have days where the negative self-talk takes over. And that's okay. Like that's expected. That's going to happen. The important part is like, how do you move past it? A big thing that I used to emphasize with my basketball girls is like, because we would lift after, at middle, we would lift after practice.
Right.
So sometimes if practice didn't go as planned, a big thing that we would practice is, okay, like everyone comes in the weight room, everyone's in a bad mood, we just got chewed out, like, it is what it is, everyone's been there. But it's like, I'm not going to sit here as a coach and expect you to come in here and be all like happy and ready to go and like ecstatic that we now get to train. It's like, we would often like be like, okay, everyone close your eyes, everyone take a deep breath, breathe it out, take a couple deep breaths, breathe it out. And like the whole goal was to acknowledge that like whatever practice we just had was horrible. It did not go well. It's over. It is what it is. And let's move forward. And I think like, and maybe this is more of like a female athlete thing or like a female environment in sports, but especially coming from softball, we have what I used to call like toxic positivity. Like it's this idea that you like always have to be like super happy and like super engaged and energetic and like no matter what's going on, whether you're on the bench or a starter or struck out or or the reason we won lost the game, like you have to just like maintain this like perfect level of like I'm just so happy to be here contributing.
Right.
And I think that's bullshit. And I think that like the the flow of sports, like the ups and downs is natural. So it's like how do I handle that? And so when I started coaching female athletes, I really want to make sure they understood like you have the space and actually I want you to like acknowledge when things are shitty. I want you to acknowledge when things don't go well. One of the like, and I'm kind of like going on a
No,
rant
it's
now,
no,
but
I love that. Like it's absolutely like they I hope that athletes listen to this. Like it's not just for the strength coach. I hope they listen to this. I know you said
yeah.
you're going on, but they need to hear this stuff.
Well, I just like, okay, so there's this theory called the white bear theory. And like in short, if you don't know what the white bear theory is, it was the study that was done where there was two groups and both groups were shown a white bear.
Mm-hmm.
And one group was told, nothing. They just shown a white bear and then the research was done on them and then about what they were thinking after they saw the white bear. And then another group was shown the white bear and they were told, don't think about the white bear. And they found obviously that the group that was told to not think about the white bear was consciously putting in the effort to not think about it, ended up thinking about it 10 times more. And so I think that's like super true and applicable to the sporting world. If I just struck out and I go back up there and all I'm thinking is like, don't swing at the changeup, don't swing at the changeup, don't swing at the changeup. Like, what am I going to do? I'm probably going to swing at the changeup because I'm so hyper focused on not doing it. And so that's where I think like the importance of learning how to like acknowledge whatever negative or failures you just had on the field and let it go is like super important because if you don't, like it's just going to sit in the back of your head and influence you regardless if you want it to or not.
Right.
And so, in short, I think that's like one of the big things that I found has helped athletes the most is like just them learning that negative thoughts are going to happen. It's more like what do you do with those negative thoughts once they're there?
Once they're there and changing them, right? And kind of like I don't want to say building upon them, but building upon them to make the change to do better next time. I know cliche sounds, failure is the best thing for success, which I mean, it is true, but it's, the white bear theory, like you said, is almost like rebellion as a child, right? If mom, dad, whoever tell you, don't do something, well, chances are you're probably going to do it, right? It's the same concept that, and kind of, it's okay to think about those things and learn how to correct it, and in this coming from the softball world, the term the yips, right? You get some of that because they try not to think about it, but you should think about it. It's the sports psychology world of stuff is amazing to me. Like I wish, and I love what I do, don't get me wrong, but I wish I would have known about that coming out of college because I think that's something that would have really interested me because it's not just the on the field performance, some performances related to, it might be a kid that was a big fish in a small pond where they came from. Well, now they're a small fish in a big pond. And some people can't handle that. It's tough to handle that. And I think, having that background, you can relate to those kids and relate to the athletes that, I say kids, I mean, they're adults, I guess, for all intents and purposes, but relate to them that, you know what they're going through, how it works. And, I use the term putting your blinders on because it's like a racehorse, forget everything else around you. Look at the goal ahead of you. When you walk in that room or on that field, that's all that matters. So,
No, 100.
you see kind of that, right? And you saw it in all different, you touched on the female aspect versus the male, and, how it might be a little bit different. And, being, what'd you call it?
Oh,
Positivity.
toxic positivity.
Yeah. I'm probably the worst person about that, like in my own sport world, when people ask, y'all going to win Friday night? I'm the worst person to ask because I think we should win every game we ever play. I'm the absolute worst. But, you talk about that and the different athletes you've worked with. You've worked with golf, you've worked with basketball, you worked with football players. Is there something that you think you would pull from each one to kind of create a hybrid athlete that maybe one sport might do better? Golf's an interesting one to me because it's not, you don't hear a lot about golf strength and conditioning, even though I know it's very high level, right? Especially at the professional
Hmm.
level.
Oh, that's a good question. Obviously, I think from like the football aspect, like the physicality of it,
Right.
the, the sprinting, the speed mechanics, that aspect of it. Not many sports get to have a 100-yard field to open up on. I think from like the basketball standpoint, more so the male side of the game, like the jumping ability,
Hmm.
and the plyometric abilities. But I think from just basketball in general, like their ability to play such small-sided games and the acceleration and decel at like such a high rapid rate so quickly and over again, especially without like getting fatigued, doing that for, 40 minutes. I think that's definitely something I would want to pull because they have to operate in such a small space and react in such a small space. And like, some of the best basketball players I've worked with, like their ability to react laterally is amazing. Like, I don't know how they're able to have the motor control to do that. And yes, I think it can get better, but I think like some of the best basketball players I've seen, it's just an innate
Yeah.
ability that
Yeah.
they have. Like it's just natural. Like I'll never forget like my best our point guard at VCU the year I was there, she had like stiffer ankles, but her ability to move laterally in excel and decel was phenomenal. And like I think her stiff ankles like was her superpower in a way because it allowed her to react so quickly. Um, but from I think like golf and softball, the ability to create like rotational power and the motor control to be able to move your hips separately from the upper half of your body and like just learning that. Because I mean, if you ask people, or I guess if you ask athletes who are not rotational athletes, that's like such a hard skill for them, which is not something
Yeah.
I realized until I got to coaching. I remember the first time I gave my gymnastics team a med ball rotational toss. It was the ugliest thing I had ever seen.
Isn't
Love
it
that team, but
crazy?
like I was like, y'all just turn your hips. Like
Yeah.
I don't understand what's so hard about it. And I'm like, obviously I understand now. Like I played softball for like 18 years.
Right. But it's crazy to see
But
like the difference in like sport, right? It's just
mhm.
uh some things that some can do and some things that some can't. Like I see some football players all the time who are real stiff in the hips, and like you said, like throwing a med ball is very ugly for them. But go tell them to sprint 20 yards and they're going to do it obviously way better than a swimmer or whatever it may be. But that swimmer might have a staggered jump far better than a football player. It's just it's I think it's amazing to see how the sport builds the skill.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. And like I think it's interesting because certain sports, the barrier for entry is a little bit different in terms of like age. Like with softball and baseball, obviously like sports like gymnastics, like really skill heavy sports where yes, being athletic is only going to make you better, but you have to be able to like learn the skill and apply the skill at a high rate. Like you can't pick baseball up at 16. But then you like hear all these stories of these kids who were like they didn't start playing football until their senior year, until
Right.
they were like 16, 17 years old, and they were just so athletically gifted that they were able to learn how to play football at a high level very quickly. Um, but like with softball, like if you didn't start learning how to hit a ball when you were younger, that's such a hard skill for your brain to learn how to do at a high level at least. when you're 17 years old and then go play D1. Like, you
Yeah.
don't really hear stories like that.
Even throwing it, like if you don't throw for a little while, like your arm's like a pool noodle. That I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that's where that term comes from. But your arm, you don't even know how to throw anymore. It's
Oh
like
my God, no.
what happened. I used to be able to chunk a softball or baseball, and now it's like there it just went 5 feet. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's
So
cool
I
to
feel
see.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, so I feel like there's like probably something from each sport I could go through, like each sport, and say what I would pull from it. Um, but those are kind of probably like the big ones from like the big main sports that I've worked with so
Right.
far.
And forgetting, I'm sure, not to harp on the sports psychology part, but the basketball player has to forget a lot quicker. We've kind of talked about it with games already. They got to forget, put a game behind them and move on to the next one. Like miss a shot, move on to the next one. Everybody sees the Michael Jordan quote about how many shots he's missed and, how many times he had the game winning shot and missed it or free throws or whatever. In that sport, it happens a lot quicker. So they got to forget about the mental part, and move on to the next shot, because at the end of the game, if Kobe Bryant was hitting a game winner, nobody was remembering the 4 shots he missed in the first.
Oh,
And I think
yeah.
that's huge, but like, whereas football is a little bit different, they're going to remember, oh, you gave up the kick return early in the game. That's what cost the game when you lost by 1 at the end. People remember that because it's not, they have a week to think about it.
And I think two things, and these both might be sidebars, but with basketball, I worked in basketball for 4 years before I transitioned back or into football only at this point, and I think my appreciation for basketball grew more and more each year. Part of that is like I understood the game a lot more, obviously, as I worked in it longer. But one, their ability to forget, but two, them as athletes, they are just like the most fascinating athletes you will ever work with. Their body types are all over the place, limb length, abilities, skill. But I always thought was one of the craziest things was some of my best players on the court were maybe some of my weaker or just like worst weight room people.
Yes. Yes,
Love them.
absolutely.
But and I would like we would like try to do like basic level plyo stuff or just like single leg hops, like very or basic sequencing stuff where it's like, okay, you're gonna go a lateral lunge into a curtsy lunge, which is like basic motor control, and it would break their brain. But then I watch them and I'm like, you just made so many choices in a 20-second time frame, took contact, made the shot, and now you're back. Like, I don't understand how you're able to react so quickly. Like, it just like
Yeah,
it blows
you're
my
getting hit underneath the
mind.
rim, falling back, and you can still. Yeah,
Right.
it's amazing, right?
I'm like, how do you have the motor control to make that shot mid contact, but you don't have the motor control to go lateral into curtsy? Like,
Yeah,
make it make sense
and
to
it's
me.
so funny to see, like, and not to harp on this different sport, but like watching a football guy go out and try and play basketball is some of the funniest stuff. Like seeing them run up and down the court and trying to dribble and all that, but in the same breath, some of the basketball guys going out to football, it's a little bit different for them, right? They're not used to, well, having all the equipment on, but kind of running around the different cuts. And, you mentioned the acceleration, deceleration, before we move on to anything, like that is one of the most underutilized things I think I see, because it is becoming, our profession is becoming more popular through social media.
Hmm.
But deceleration is one of the most underutilized things you don't really see a lot of people hitting on. You see some here and there, but it's so underutilized and such a valuable thing. It's just as important as acceleration.
Yeah, and I think especially on the basketball side of things, you're starting to see a lot more interest in research into like what does deceleration actually do to the body? Does deceleration rate matter? How many decels are having in a practice game? Like those types of things, I think you're starting to see like a lot more research and attention paid to it, specifically in the basketball world. And obviously that's where I spent a lot of time the last 4 years. That's kind of what I was plugged into, but it's definitely an up and coming topic in that part of our profession.
Yeah, it is. Well, what's something, while we're talking about that, what's something that, in your opinion, your program, right? Your programming, or what you see that's something that might be overrated, because we see the underrated. What's the overrated? That's kind of like, okay, we can find some other way to do that.
I think it's more of a concept that I think is overrated. I think proper Yeah, let me not say proper. But I think movement progressions are overrated. And I think context is important on this one. If you have the proper time to build an athlete up, let's just say through a squat progression, right? Like you start with like your air squat, then goblet, and then we go into front squat, yada yada yada. But a lot of times with these athletes, especially with how the transfer portal and NIL works nowadays, and like especially on the basketball side of things, and I know we're talking a lot about basketball,
Yeah,
but
no, that's fine.
especially on the basketball side of things, like you are literally getting kids for 8, 9 months. So it's like, respectfully, I have 8 weeks to get you strong enough to get through the season before we start transitioning into like our heavy practice period. And it's like, I have one summer block with you. So if you can't front squat proficiently, I'm not gonna waste, it's not a waste of time, but like I need to build strength. I'm not here to make you the best front squatter I've ever seen in my life. So if for you it's trap bar or it's a Hatfield or it's a back squat that's going to allow us to build that lower body strength or that bilateral squatting strength, whatever you're, then shoot, let's do it.
Yeah.
Because we just don't have time anymore to go, by the book of how every progression should go and how you learn how to do it when you are like a younger strength coach in the field. And like, I get it when it used to be like, yeah, I'm gonna have this kid for the next 5 years for sure. It's a lot easier to be like, yeah, let's take the time.
Yeah, you could take
But
a full
you
year to
just
do it.
right, you just don't have that luxury very much anymore. And so it's like we gotta move, especially on the basketball side of things. I think on the football side of things, you still have, yes, there's a lot more transferring, but you do get kids who are like gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna give this, 2 or 3 years, and then if halfway through my college career it's not really shaking out how I need it to here, I'll transfer.
Yeah.
So you do get a little bit more time, in my opinion, on the football side as of right now. Obviously, with how this landscape is changing so quickly, that could change as well. But yeah, I think movement progressions can be very overrated because you just don't have time sometimes. And sometimes it's more just like looking at what this athlete's body type is. I mean, basketball, your posts are usually way more hinge dominant. So it's like, okay, like if a safety bar squat works better for you, why would I not use
Right.
that?
You
Like,
use
why
the
am I
tools that
gonna
are there for you to make your job easier.
Exactly. Like, why am I gonna fight your anatomy for 8 weeks just for you to not get stronger? Like, I learned I was so stubborn about front squat with my basketball girls the first 2 years of my career at middle, and I just felt like we would plateau so quickly because the bar was uncomfortable. I mean, I'd have 6'6" girls who just like they're like, Coach Tess, like the bar on my collarbone hurts, and like I don't want to put more weight on it. So it's like we're not getting stronger. And I remember one year I was like, you know what? Screw it. We're going to start with Hatfield. We're just going to start with Hatfield in off season, first summer block. And it went so well. And I remember like we did it all through year. I had girls all of a sudden hitting 315 out of nowhere. Like it was just a total game changer because something about putting the bar on their back mentally and that positioning, they just were way more bought in to trying to go heavier. And it was like, that was like for me the moment where I realized like, okay, I don't have to do everything by the S&C book.
Right, by the
Sometimes
book.
it's like what fits your context the best.
And your athletes, what are they, what's going to make them most comfortable to make them trust you and work for you? I
Mhm.
think that's where a lot of people miss out on this great profession, is that they think like, all right, it has to be by the book. And you see it all the time on social media, especially on Twitter, or X or whatever you call it now, is the arguing that if one person doesn't like the way you do something, it's the wrong way. Like your athletes are different. You just proved it right there. Like your kids didn't like front squatting, but Hatfield squat they did, and you saw tremendous results. If that's what works for you, that's what works for you. And there's
Mhm.
1,000 ways to skin a cat, right? I mean, sorry, cats in the room. Sorry about that, but yeah, there's 1,000 ways to do it, and you can do it all different types of way. But what works best for your athletes? What I do at my school, I might send you and not be great for your team, but it's the way
Mhm.
that my kids are wired, and what's the best results for them. Like I beg my kids all the time, let's please do a 3-rep max on squat. They refuse to let me. They're like, no, coach, we're doing 1 rep. We want to see what we can do. And even our female athletes, they're the same way. Like we want to do 1 rep. We don't, we're not playing with this 3-rep stuff. We're not playing with any of that. Like, but it's all about how your kids are wired and what works for you. And that's what builds your program. You might change from year to year, or I look back on some stuff and I'm like, man, that was dumb 3 years ago. Why would I do that?
I'm like a big believer, and I think it's a scale, but I'm a big believer of context is king, and maybe I'm like a little too bit much on the context side sometimes. But I just think like unless you are there day to day and like you know exactly what's going on with our program and team and where we're at, like you really can't judge what you just see from the programming sense. Um, like I middle, if you would have walked in sometimes on my women's basketball lifts, they look super chaotic.
Yeah.
But it's organized, like, and we had our things that work. Like for them, like I let them have aux, and they had a great freaking time with it. And that was like a huge piece of the buy-in was like for them, our program was really structured and very disciplined. But the weight room, I figured out that we could get to a place where it's like, okay, I will let you guys have some freedom and autonomy, and you know whatever that looks like picking your squat or picking this or having the ox be one of the girls, like whatever it may be to make you guys feel like you have a little bit of freedom, but in return, I need you to work hard. And like it was understood that if you do not work hard, then those things get taken away. And there was times that they got taken away for sure because
Yeah.
they were not on their shit. But you know, it's like, but when I got to VCU, totally different personality of team, still just as great group of girls, but they just operated totally differently. The coaching staff was different, and I had to like completely kind of reshape how I ran my lift sessions because that controlled chaos really didn't work the same way once I got to VCU. And they needed different stuff, you know? They had different things that we needed to develop. And so I had to learn that team, figure out like, okay, what is the context dictating now?
And I think that's a huge thing to build buy-in, right? Is kind of giving them that a little autonomy sometimes. I know I've always been told this, and I'm just a believer in it, that the music's for them, not you. And I know that's something little in the weight room, but it's for them. Them listening to my 90s hip hop probably isn't the thing they want to hear because it's not their style of music these days.
Hmm.
I notice the difference when it's something like that and their energy level and the way they move around versus, I'm big on letting them create playlists. Like you create the playlist, I'll put it on. Whatever you want to listen to, I'm fine with it. We can make it happen. But, giving them that autonomy in some things, like you said, picking your squat maybe, or, I let them sometimes the last 5 minutes, like pick on what you want to work on. If you want to do
Hmm.
biceps, do biceps. If you want to, do shoulders, do shoulders. It doesn't matter to me, whatever you want to work on. But giving that autonomy builds the buy-in to you, and builds the open dialogue of like, hey coach, I think this worked good for us, or maybe this doesn't work as good. Or, my kids, they moan and groan about Zercher squats, but we do them every Saturday morning after football games, and they moan and groan about it until they start doing them. And then I see these kids trying to, add more and more weight on their RPE that they think they can do. And it's amazing to see sometimes, but it's like y'all just moaned and groaned for the past 20 minutes of having to do them, and now here we are, but kind of giving that autonomy. I think that's how us as strength coaches build the buy-in to our program and who we are and how we do things. So
Yeah, I'm a big fan of autonomy. I think it's like if I am running a program and it's my team, then like once I feel like we've kind of gotten the base level down, then it's like, okay, how do I mix in opportunities for autonomy, whether that's asking for feedback, whether that's, like giving choices, getting to decide the music, whatever it may be. I think like so many things are structured in your athlete's life, and they actually need to like learn how to make choices.
yeah,
Like your entire day is laid out for you, and when you get out of college, it's not going to be like that anymore. Like you have to learn how to actually operate like I remember having a conversation with one of my basketball girls at one point, and they were like, my lift like wasn't put on my teamwork for me. And I'm like, okay, did you know all your other teammates had lift today? Yeah. And you didn't think that maybe you also had lift? Well, I just thought maybe something I was like, hey, this is when you come have a conversation. We sort through it. It is not everyone's job to make sure that you are doing, like, you have to take accountability and be able to, like, recognize what's going on or not going on in your life when it doesn't look like it should. So it's like, you have to give these kids skills to be able to operate in the real world because the real world does not operate like college athletics all the time.
right. And I mean, not to sound like an old head because I don't see myself that way, or how the kids like to say the but like kids are a lot different after COVID. They really are. And I know at my level it's a little bit different because I'm starting to see those formative years going away where they were in first grade, fifth grade, or whatever it was. But man, it's changing. They, especially like most schools across the nation, I think these days have technology in their school, computers and stuff like that. There is no more, like, some of those skills and those communication skills have gone away. And like getting them to understand, like, the communication part of it, that, like, you can ask questions, like, no question's a dumb question. You can figure out what's going on and why. Like, I think some of that's a lost skill these days with 15 to 21-year-old kids.
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree.
So, I love that you've worked with both male and female athletes, and especially, different landscapes of different sports. One of the things that I hear all the time from my female athletes and younger female athletes is, the term bulky. Like, is this going to make me bulky? And it's a stigma, and it's a challenge for young females that, like, how they don't realize at their age how hard it is for that to happen. I have you, and in my case, and even in your case, working with female athletes, you have them for 4, maybe 5 short years. That doesn't happen overnight. You don't sleep well enough, you don't eat well enough, you don't get enough protein to get
Right.
the bulky that you think you're going to get. Is there like a piece of advice as a former athlete and as a strength coach who's worked with male and female, like, that you can give the high school coach to kind of help motivate the female athletes about embracing lifting heavy? Because, I mean, I know our girls get excited when they get that heavy squat, or, I got some pretty strong, 275 to 405 girl squatters at our school that are, they're a freaking beast.
Yeah, I think one is giving them the little wins. When they start to see the little strength wins or skill wins in the weight room, it's going to continue to motivate them. Um, but I also think that what maybe younger female athletes and even college athletes don't always understand is how much you have to actually eat to be bulky. Like, if you are training and your goal is to put on mass, especially like lean mass, like, you have to be eating in a surplus consistently. And I know how these female athletes eat. Like, your one meal a day, I promise you, is not going to make you bulky. Like, your smoothie for breakfast and your coffee for lunch and then your Chick-fil-A for dinner is not, that's not going to make you bulky.
Yeah.
Like, I think they see it as just like a one-way street of, like, if I start lifting, I will get heavier. And yeah, you might get heavier because you are gaining muscle, and muscle weighs more, as we know. But in order to like actually be bulky, you would have to be eating an absurd amount of calories in a surplus, especially at like an age that they're at where it's like you're still developing a lot. So it's like you're still burning calories, your body is still changing. Like, even my body composition like changed a lot throughout college and even when I got out of college. So it's like you're still in these like formative years. It's not
Yeah.
like you're 35 years old and sedentary. Like, I just think that you have to give them the perspective and kind of open their eyes that it's not just this like cause and effect of like, now I lift, now I'm bulky. It's like, no, you lift, but all these other things would have to happen in order for you to be what you deem
Bulky.
bulky.
Yeah. Which is crazy. Like, I get it more so from the parent side. I think, like, our girls don't need to lift because it's going to get them bulky and they can't, whatever sport it is, throw the softball the same way, or they can't, hit the volleyball the same way or shoot the basketball. And it's like, this doesn't happen at this time and age. There's not enough time for me or enough protein intake or whatever it is, that can get your daughter to what you deem bulky. And I just think it's absurd. It's almost like the lifting at a young age, stunt your growth. How many times has that been scientifically disproven? My own kids, like,
Right.
my daughter started lifting at body weight wise. We talk about movement pattern. She started doing her block zero body weight at 7 years old, and by 10, she was competing in meets, and it's like, and she's still, she's not bulky, she's put together, but she's not, and she's been lifting for 5 years now, but she's by no sense of the word bulky. She looks like every other 12-year-old out there,
Right.
and it's just
Right.
some of that. And she's probably got more advantage being her age to kind of build upon that than the athletes that we work with day to day. And it's such a stigma that, the second it goes away and they kind of build upon it, you'll just see everything blow up. And I love that part of it. So, you've kind of had all these different experiences, with different sports, from playing softball, playing football, or not playing football, I'm saying playing softball, working with football, and working with basketball. Is
Hmm.
there kind of a core principle that applies to every athlete, no matter what?
I think, once again, more of, I guess, like a concept,
Yeah.
but just like become more athletic.
Yeah.
That sounds like so much simpler than it really is. And obviously, I think those goals kind of change as you start to figure out like what are your weaknesses and strengths as an athlete, and especially in like regards to your sport and performance. However, like continuing to get stronger and become more athletic, like as long as you are moving in that direction, you will not go wrong with your training. And like, yes, the modalities to do that, it's going to train or it's going to change sport to sport. Like with football, you might be doing, more longer distance duration running stuff, or with volleyball, it's more jump training, whatever. But the end goal is to become more athletic. Like that's never going to fail you.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, we're building athletes. It's not, I hate the term like football specific workout or, softball specific workout. Tell me what that looks like. Are there little things that are done in different sports? It might be more rotational in softball than it is with football, but find me what a specific workout is, and I might be able to buy into what you're talking about, this specific thing, but we're building athletes, right? So if you had to give advice to a coach, a starter kit for someone who wants to be a strength coach, no matter the age, the male, female, it doesn't matter. What's the starter kit for a future in this profession? The, kind of three most essential items. What do you need to know?
Um, One, you will need to learn to have an insane amount of patience and understanding. Two, you need to learn how to sniff out bullshit a mile away.
Yeah,
And three, kind of a joke, but like your caffeine intake skills need to be high. You will be drinking a lot of caffeine
you're
in your
always
career.
tired, right? I don't know
Yes,
about
like
you.
it's,
I was talking to this about the guys at work today. Like, I feel better sleeping off of 4 to 5 hours a night than I do sleeping like I felt bad all day today because I actually got 9 hours of sleep last night, and I felt worse than I feel on a normal day where I get 4 to 5.
oh my God, yes, because like your body, like actually, when you get like the 9 hours, your body's like, whoa, we are not okay. Like we need to do that more often. And it's like that's just not going to
It
happen.
never,
Like your body's too aware when you actually get the proper night's sleep.
yeah, it never happens. But I also love the one, seeing through the bullshit. Like, it's not. I guess that kind of goes back to our talk about like, I know a lot of people with a lot of letters behind their name that can't teach a group of middle schoolers how to RDL. It's not always about like, what you have, which those things are great. And I appreciate those things, from the CSCS to, in the high school realm, the NHSSCA came out with the high school strength and conditioning coaches certification. All those things are great, but can you coach or not? And,
Hmm.
on the flip side of that, your athletes can see through the bullshit. If they don't, they know when you're not, a upfront and honest with them, but B, kind of have their back. They know they can't trust, and like that's a great one as a coming into the profession coach. Like, see through some of that.
Yeah, you have to. I think like it's, and I was like this too. I think when I was an intern and everything is really shiny and new and you're not seeing all the realities of what it's like to actually be a full-time staff member or, make a wage that you really deserve to get like two times that wage and all those or, all the things that admin do that make your life so much harder sometimes. And there's like a lot of aspects that you don't necessarily see when you're starting out in the field. And so I say like learn how to be critical of where you're at. I don't mean critical in a negative way, but it's like you have to be realistic about what are things that your organization does well and what are the things that your organization doesn't do well. And I say that because like everywhere has those things. So it's not like you're ever going to arrive to a job or a position where everything's going to be perfect. you just have to figure out like what are the things that I'm okay with putting up with? What are the things that I can work through that are not like deal breakers for me? And what are the things where it's like I know I need my organization to have this, or I need my team to have like this, I need this. Um, because everywhere you go, there's gonna be things you like and don't like. And so you have to be able to take off the rose-colored glasses and be able to be realistic about like what type of environment you're in and how it helps or hinders you and what are the things that you're going to have to work harder to not let influence you, or what are the things that I'm going to have to work harder to continue to develop on that maybe this environment doesn't support right away. And I don't say any of that to be like critical of the places that people are at. It's just like that's just the reality of our field, or like being in business.
Yeah, picking
And
your
so,
battles, kind of, right?
right, 100%. And so like I think like an extension of being able to see through the bullshit is like you have to, they're like, don't ever stop asking questions. I'm always really big on my interns on like asking questions. Like if you're not, there's no way you don't have questions. Like you're an intern. You don't know even like the slightest bit of what you think you know. So like you better be asking questions. There's no way we just went through a 5 hour lift and you don't have one single question for me.
Right.
Like that's insane. So it's like, but I think that's like through your whole career. Like if you're not asking questions, then you need to take a step back and be like, okay, well, why am I not asking questions anymore? Like, what is the reason? Because the more questions you can ask and the more you can have like a better understanding of your surroundings, your environment, the people you're working with, the better you're going to be able to function within that environment as a
Yeah,
strength
because
coach.
nobody knows everything, right? There's probably stuff. There's people we've both worked with that probably forgot more than we know at this point. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, you don't know it all. It's asking questions is a huge one. Like, if you're not constantly, even if it's one or two things, if you're not constantly learning,
Right.
you're becoming, extinct, I guess, in this world. It's a constant learning. You can have your meat and potatoes, but you got to constantly progress, because that's kind of what it's turning into. It's, having the technology, having all these different measurements and things that we can do, you constantly have to learn and ask the questions about it.
And questions like have the types of questions I ask have definitely changed as my career has moved. Like, I think when I took the job at VCU, that was like my first like director position, and it was a smaller director position for sure. But there was a lot of stuff I didn't know to ask. I didn't know how to ask about the budget. I didn't know how to ask about scheduling stuff. Like, there's a lot of things I had to learn, and it's like, well, now if and when I take another director role, I have a list of questions I am ready to be asking the second I step foot into that position. Or like where I'm at now, like my director, he's been around for 27 plus years of coaching. Like he's won national championships. He is phenomenal at people management. And, so a lot of the questions now are like, how would you handle this situation? How do you navigate this? Like, what does that conversation look like? Like, those are very different questions than what I was asking at 23, where I was just like trying to figure out like how to put an annual plan together for the first time.
Yeah, and it's not so much. I wouldn't call it an ego or an arrogance, right? Some people see questions being asked as an ego or arrogance, and it's not that. It's just, we're all here to learn, and we're all here to figure it out and progress this profession, because it's. I personally think it is going to be one that's going to be even more popular. I think it is because of social media. You see it
Mm-hmm.
not. You see it more on the influencer side, or whatever that word means. I don't know. That's kind of like a created word to me. It came about ever since 2020. But this influencer world. But you see that dealing with weights or dealing with strength and conditioning and all that is becoming so much more popular. And
Mm-hmm.
I love to see it, but that's why the questions constantly have to be asked and the progression has to keep going.
Yeah,
So
100%.
I got a few more for you. These are a little more fun than your run of the mill strength and conditioning ones, but I love to ask the guests just so we can get to know you a little bit better, because just like we met, I'm sure you're an open book to give advice, especially to young females getting into this profession, to have such a role model that's, you know, nobody's ever made it, right, but you've made it to where, you're at a big school, nobody ever wants to consider themselves made it, but you're on the way. So my first one is, if you could have a superpower in the weight room, what would it be and why? I'll give you an
Oh,
example of it. Um, one of our guests said telekinesis to kind of understand what the athletes are thinking, which I think is a good one. It's been harder to name them, I think, than figuring one out. But for you, what would it be?
I think maybe super speed
Hmm.
so I could get to a lot of places quickly. Because sometimes you're on one side of the weight room and you see something going down and you're like, that's not going to end how we want that to end. But it's like you don't get there fast enough or you're not loud enough to get their attention. And they're halfway through this shitty set and you're like, ugh. But if I had super speed, I could just whip over there and stop it before it even goes down.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's the first time I've heard that one, which I think is great. You can be in multiple. I can start the group that's outside, get them going, and before they get done with that first sprint, I can be back inside starting the weight room group. That's a great one. I love the Flash is one of my favorites, so that's a great one.
There we go.
Um, book wise, Coach, what's a book that kind of you would recommend for a young coach, whether it's in the strength and conditioning world or a young athlete, even like something you would give your kids, like, hey, you need to read this. It's gonna kind of be life changing.
Um, I think I have a fascination with the idea of like being gritty and mental toughness because in like the sports psych world, they say like mental toughness is a very tough thing to actually quantify and judge. But if you look closer at it, grit is like a big cornerstone of it.
Yep.
So there was a study done by, her name is Angela Ducksworth, I believe, and she has a book, I think it's literally just called Grit It.
Yep.
I've read it twice. But I think that book is phenomenal. It kind of breaks down grit into the couple things and it has a lot of anecdotal stuff in it. But I think especially for like a young strength coach who is trying to navigate their way through this field, I often think of a couple stories to that book where it's like people who were successful were just like the people who continued to keep trying and figuring out how to push forward and not, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, like not always people who were necessarily the most talented or had the most connections to start off. And like that book definitely kind of gives me the push to keep going when I feel like I'm really starting to run into that wall career wise.
Yeah, because I think we all feel it in this career, right? Sometimes there's a bunch of, not to have low self esteem by any means, but there's some self doubt. Like, am I doing the right thing to get these athletes where they need to be, And sometimes that's seen in losses. When you get a loss, it's like, man, did I do everything I possibly could to get them prepared? There's a lot of I guess we would call it self-reflection, right? And that's a great book to embody this profession that you got to keep going. You got to, got to put it behind you. You got to put it in the back, in the rearview mirror, and let's keep going on to the next one, because no one says you can't lose one game and end up winning the national championship. Like, especially this
Hmm.
day and age with the playoff, like no one says you can't do that. So that's a great one. I've heard that one a few times. Last question I have, which has been my favorite one so far. If you are on a deserted island and you can have one
Okay.
piece of weight equipment, whether that's something that can be functional and used in a multifaceted way or just something to work out, what's that piece of weight equipment and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, I feel like I feel like I would go maybe a kettlebell.
Okay.
I feel like it'd have to be like okay, like a set of kettlebells. We'll go with a set of kettlebells. Maybe like a 35 or 45 pound set. I feel like I'm probably thinking about it more from like a training aspect. There's like a lot of, I feel like, training stuff you can do with the kettlebells, and if you have two, you can go front rack, you can go single, like there's a lot of stuff you
Yeah.
could do. But then I also do think technically, kettlebells have metal, so maybe I can use them to start a fire somehow. Maybe I can use them to help, keep my shelter in place. I feel like you could find a lot of functional uses
Uses
for
for
it.
it, right?
Right, like maybe if
Hammer.
somehow exactly, if I came across something I could make a fishing net out of, I could use that as like, I don't know, there's a lot of things I could see like the kettlebells becoming useful for, from a survival sense.
Yeah, which is, I've kind of, by no means do I rate the strength coach based off their answer to this, but I've noticed kettlebell a lot, and it's all about, I think, your training philosophy. It gives you this answer, because I've heard some things like, well, your personality, I even had one, a trampoline, and their thought process was, well, if I'm stranded, I'm just going to have fun. which I appreciate that, Like me personally, I said trap bar because I looked at the multi-facet of it. You can jump with it, you can squat it, you can press it, you can pull it, you can, curl it, you can extend it. Like I looked at it in that aspect. I didn't look at it in the aspect of like, it's going to help me survive. But then I've had athletic trainer told me a battle rope because they can use it for different things, and it's all about, I think, your thought process and where you see, finding solutions. Her answer to it was, as athletic trainers, we try and find survival solutions, and battle rope would be the survival solution, which, hey, I get it, right?
Yeah, I'm a big like efficiency person. Like I want to get the job done as efficiently and as well as possible. So I feel like that kind of probably gives some clarity around my kettlebell. I'm like, okay, what can I do the most with in my head?
And
what makes sense?
Even if it rusts, it can still move around, right? It's not like a barbell.
Right.
Now I got to go harvest coconut oil to keep the barbell spinning. So, Coach, I can't tell you how much. I know it was difficult to get our schedules lined up, and, for you taking the time, especially in the middle of football season with everything you got going on and, to be able to hop on here with us, this has been I could probably talk all day because it's just been such a great talk. Do you have social medias that our listeners can follow you at?
Yeah, I'm pretty much just on Instagram, which is at Coach Tessa Grossman. And if anyone wants to talk shop, or if you're a younger coach who wants to, talk more about how to get started in the field or just those types of experiences, I'm more than happy to chat. I try to set up calls or get back to every single person who reaches out to me, looking to chop it up. So please feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. That's needed in this profession, y'all, is kind of having someone you can go to that's going to answer. And, even if it might not be immediately, I know Coach will answer back. So, Coach, again, I can't thank you enough for coming on. We look forward to seeing this episode and seeing your future career and how it progresses and builds.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was awesome.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for listening to the Moffitt Method Podcast. You can find us on Instagram, X, and Facebook, where we share tons of free content to help your team get stronger and win more championships. Be sure to subscribe to our free blog where we post high-quality training insights every week. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Moffitt Method Podcast. We hope you found today's discussion enlightening and empowering as you continue your journey in sports and strength and conditioning. Before you go, make sure to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where we share more tips, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. Just search for Moffitt Method Podcast and hit that follow button. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite listening platform. That way, you'll never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd love it if you could leave us a review or share this podcast with a friend. It really helps us out. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, the key to success is just one more workout away. Until next time, stay strong and stay inspired.